Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm thrilled to have two really fantastic people on as guests. We have Emily Rudenick-LeBlanc, who is the CEO, and Erin Kozma, who's the Senior Director of Advancement for CASA of Travis County. And their signature fundraising event is coming up. It's called CASABlanca, where futures take root. And it's one of Austin's premier and very best run signature fundraising events that I go to every year. It's a great mission, it's a great cause, and they really have probably the most incredible volunteer network of any organization I've ever seen. It really is phenomenal. So we're going to dive into that, the event, and so much more, and it's going to be a really fun chat today. So with that, Emily, Erin, welcome, and I'm just so thrilled to have you both here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Emily, share with us the mission of CASA Travis County.
Sure. So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates, and our mission is to promote and protect the best interest of children who have experienced abuse or neglect by empowering volunteers to advocate for their safety, their well-being, and for opportunities to thrive.
You know, that's incredible. And I want to, what these court appointed volunteers do is really, really important. Talk a little bit about, because it's not like, it's like, hey, I'm here, and they send them to a courtroom. So talk a little bit about, the process of what those people go through so that they really are giving children in the court system the voice they deserve.
Right. Our volunteers, when they come to us, the first thing we do is put them through a pretty extensive screening and training process. So that involves an interview, background checks, reference checks, those sorts of things. And then we have a 39-hour core training program that every volunteer goes through before they are ever introduced to a child or a family. Once they finish that 39 hours, that includes some court observations, so they're able to see other advocates doing the work and what it really means in the courtroom before they're assigned to a case. They're sworn in by a judge, and then they're matched to a case based on their expertise and their interests. And so they'd be matched to one family, either one child or one sibling group that they would work with through the duration of their CPS case.
Wow. So I never realized that they're actually sworn in.
Yes, every CASA advocate swears an oath to the judge in Travis County.
Wow, that's really, really cool. And that just goes to show one, how respected CASA is, but also how critical it is really to the process of guiding a child successfully through that. I never realized that it was to that point. So I think that's just incredible that how seriously the court system takes what you do and how seriously, you take the volunteers' work. I think that's amazing. And
Absolutely.
I want to talk next about how each of you got involved with with the organizations. And Erin, I want to start with you. You both have very interesting paths as to how you got here. And I was talking with Erin in the green room about hers and Emily about hers as well. So Erin, go ahead and share with us, your pathway to this organization.
Absolutely. I actually grew up getting to admire the amazing work that CASA did. My mother was a child welfare judge here in Travis County for about 20 years. And through watching her work in our community, she worked very, very closely with CASA during that time. I got to learn about CASA. In fact, my very first fundraiser I ever did in high school was to benefit CASA and the kids that we serve. I put on a play, and all of the proceeds were donated to CASA, and we raised enough money to pay for, at the time, one advocate for a child for a year, and that was really exciting. And so ever since then, I've just had a deep love and passion for the work that we do, seeing just how transformative it can be in our community. And so when I got out of grad school, I had an opportunity to come work for CASA here, and I've now been here on and off for about 10 years. So yeah.
Wow, good, good for you. And how cool that they literally hooked you in when you were in high
Yes.
school, and you're still, still with them today. What has made this organization really kind of be, it's almost like your nonprofit North Star, because, North Stars are, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And like you said, you spent a period of time not at CASA. What always makes you come back?
It absolutely is that. I have worked for CASA 3 times, 2 different programs. And so it is, I leave and I keep coming back to it. You know, at the core of the work, obviously it's the mission, and the families and the children that we serve in our community, giving young people a voice in a time that often they feel like there is no one listening to them and there is no one standing for them, I find incredibly inspiring. Um, and then specifically here at CASA of Travis County, our culture as a staff, as an organization is probably one of the most incredible places that I've had an opportunity to work at. We are all held to very high standards. We have, because of the kids that we serve, we want to do our absolute best to put our best foot forward. But the team here is so incredibly compassionate and empowering to each other. We all try to push ourselves and make ourselves better and celebrate our wins together. It's just a really special place to work and really special people to be around.
That's an amazing journey. And Emily's is, you know, I would say it would be a tough act to follow, but Emily's is just as actually interesting and fascinating as Erin's is. So, you know, Emily, talk about, you know, your path to CASA, and then as well as your path to becoming CEO of CASA.
Of course. So I started my career as a trauma therapist at a residential treatment center. So I was counseling teenagers, almost all of whom were involved in either juvenile justice system or the child protective services system, and really specialized early on in kids who'd experienced abuse, neglect, sexual assault, and other trauma. And went from there to work at what was then Safe Place, now the Safe Alliance, working with survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault and domestic violence. And started there managing their counseling department, still as a trauma therapist. But at both the RTC and at Safe Place, I was the therapist who kept going to court with my clients because I felt like someone needed to tell the judge what was in their best interest. And I regularly got told by judges that that was not a normal thing for therapists to do. And I normally got told by my bosses that that's not a normal thing for therapists to do. Therapists, you know, tend to stay in their offices and everything that's said is confidential and they see client after client. And I really felt like if I was going to make a difference, I needed to be able to speak outside of that session. And so I moved over to the advocacy side of Safe Place at the time and became their senior director of community advocacy, which really put me in the position to talk to police departments and DA's offices and, you know, community organizations about what was needed and how to get involved. So CASA was really the culmination of all of that work. It was a place where I could train other advocates, supervise other advocates, and give the community the opportunity to step up and be advocates for the kids that I've been working with for nearly 20 years at that point. And I've been here for almost 9 years. First as the chief program officer, really running the mission-driven parts of the organization, and just stepped into the CEO role in July when our CEO of 18 years decided to move on. So I'm happy to be in this role. My very first day at CASA was actually at the CASABlanca Gala in 2017. So I'm excited to get a chance to talk about that and how it's been such an important part of my journey. Certainly hooked me from the beginning to see the community's generosity there. You know, I knew from that day forward I was part of something extraordinary. So I'm excited to get to share that with your audience.
That's amazing. And first of all, bravo to you. You know, sometimes, you know, it's sometimes the cause finds you, and the fact that you were going into court for these children when it wasn't conventional for therapists to do so. It's almost like you were made for this organization and made for to lead this organization. Hearing that, and the other cool thing is that you and I both went to CASA, the first CASA at the same time, which is actually that's really cool too. It's funny what a small world, what a small world that is. And I want to turn to the gala, because I know Casablanca is such, it raises $2 million. It is a really highly successful gala. And I'd love for you to share, because this will be your, like you said, your ninth one. Talk about how you may approach this differently as the CEO of the organization versus the person running programs.
Sure. I think, the biggest difference is as Chief Program Officer, I was focused on how do I give members of the community the opportunity to really be the advocate and to be a voice for kids and for a family who may need someone to stand up for them and speak up for them. And as CEO, I'm doing the same thing just in a different way. So inviting people to use their donations and their time to step up and support the same efforts it is another opportunity for the community to really take responsibility for and help the kids that really belong to all of us. It's what got me into this work. It's what I firmly believe. But getting to see how different people have different talents, and for some, the way that they support the community is to volunteer, and for others, the way to support is to show up at events like Casablanca and support us financially. And we invite everyone to be part of the solution, no matter what feels most comfortable to you, which way you want to get involved. And so, as CEO, I get to see a lot more of the fundraising side and a lot more of the other ways that community members can step up and support the kids of Travis County. So I'm excited about that.
Well, what's amazing is you really described how a good CEO operates. Because, and I've talked about this on this show with several guests before, that there's multiple types of capital. And you talked about, the financial capital that some people like to come in and give. You talked about the human capital, which is your incredible volunteer network. And we'll talk about how you involve them in just such unique ways at the event, as well as the social capital of just bringing people together. And your response as CEO and seeing and understanding that, I just know that the event is just going to soar to even newer heights this year, and last year was, really spectacular. And, Erin, I want you to, if you can, one, share, because I do get questions from people like what exactly an advancement officer does, because it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a new title in the nonprofit space, but it's one that's being more commonly used now. So talk about that and how you use Casablanca from, an advancement perspective to connect with donors and supporters to further the organization's mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I answer that question, I do want to tack on really quickly to what you were chatting with Emily about and the difference in her role. I think something that I'm really excited about this year to see Emily step into, throughout the course of the years, Emily has been the keeper of our stories here at CASA and the keeper of the voices of our volunteers and the voices of the kids that we serve. And she is such an incredibly compelling storyteller. I always really enjoy getting to listen to her tell the stories because she witnessed them herself. She worked directly with the volunteers and the kids in our community. And so I'm so excited that the community gets to now see from someone who did that frontline work and hear those stories. I hate, like, I have to brag on my new boss because she tells stories with such conviction and passion, that I'm really excited for our community to get to witness that this year at the event. So that's something that's going to be a little bit different, and I'm very excited to see this year. So going back to what you did ask, Rob, and in talking about how like what my role is, I'm really fortunate at to lead not only our fundraising efforts here at CASA, but our marketing and communication efforts. And I think that has really allowed us to look at Casablanca through a variety of lenses, not just how are we going to raise the most money that night, which is obviously the bottom line in our hope to raise as much money, but how are we going to lead with stories and communicate the work that we're doing and allow our audience and our guests to really feel like they understand our mission and walk away from the event feeling like they've truly made a difference. Something that I think is really interesting and I'm very excited for this year is Our marketing manager, our marketing and communications manager, is actually leading the logistics and the experience of the event itself. And she's brought a lot of really interesting ideas on how to infuse our mission throughout the night in ways that we haven't really thought about before. Because oftentimes we're trying to check all of our boxes. We've got our silent auction, we've got our live auction, but she's able, while I have my fundraisers working on raising money, she gets to sit there and work and think about what is the experience that the guests are going to have? How are we going to wrap them up in these stories? How are we really going to communicate what the kids we're serving are going through right now? And so I think that that'll be really exciting to see this year.
That's amazing. And thank you for kind of sharing how you, through the different lenses that you handle and you manage and you navigate, creating a successful experience. And I'm really especially grateful that you talked about the importance of the guest experience as well, because a lot of organizations sometimes will look towards the fundraising as the prize and
Mhm.
sometimes bypass the guest. And we'll get into how you all just do such an amazing job with that a little bit later on, a little bit later on in the program. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about the event more broadly. And Emily, I want to address the next question for you. And, this kind of ties your previous life with your current one. So talk about some of the programs that Casablanca helps fund and or support.
Casablanca funds our mission, so to promote and protect the best interest of children who've experienced abuse or neglect. At its core, that's what Casablanca is going to pay for. Over the years, we've developed several different programs to help support that core mission. And Casablanca certainly supports those as well. So we have our Bridge to Permanency program, which supports the children we serve by providing direct financial assistance to families nearing reunification or who are staying with family members or fictive kin who are facing financial barriers. We're able to assist those families so that those children don't have to enter the foster care system. Our family finding program is a whole team of volunteers and staff who dedicate their time to help find family members who can be support for the children in the system so that if they've lost contact with a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or sometimes it's fictive kin, so an old neighbor or a teacher that used to be supportive of them who might be able to support the family during the hardest time of their life. We've got a whole team of volunteers looking for and engaging those folks to bring them back into children's lives in the hopes of keeping kids from having to enter foster care or in the hopes of getting them out of foster care and back to their families and communities as quickly as possible when it's safe to do so. And then our newest program is our Promising Futures program. So we just started a pilot to think about and see how we might serve families and youth beyond the closure of their case. So when kids age out at 18, sometimes they've had the support of CPS and CASA and their attorney and all of the other systems involved in the court system. And as soon as the case closes, we all disappear. And just because you turned 18 doesn't mean you all of a sudden don't need any support. So the Promising Futures pilot allows us to walk alongside those youth if they want us to. It's completely voluntary to help them pursue whatever their goals may be. And that might be to find secure housing or, finish their GED or get into college or, whatever they've set forth as their goals, our advocates are going to help them achieve. And the same for families whose cases may have closed. We're working with some families right now who have experienced domestic violence and their mothers can provide a safe home if given a little support to get into a different apartment or help them find a job. So we're exploring what that looks like and how we get them to the other services in our community that can be the long-term solution. But CASA, because we've been in their lives, sometimes is the trusted advocate, and we can make that warm handoff and get them to the right folks so that they can hopefully stay out of the system, not come back to the CPS system, and for our youth to not enter the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system as adults.
What's so amazing about those programs is what you are doing after court. And there's multiple acts, and I'm so excited to see this pilot program that you talked about evolve, because there's the child getting out of the court system, but then there's when they turn 18 and what happens next as adults. So I love that you're giving additional resources to these children that need them after court, and that's such an incredible thing, and that's why this event and this fundraiser is so incredibly important to the children of Travis County going through those going through those challenges. And Erin, I want to kind of turn that back in that context to the gala, because one of the reasons this is successful is you have to, there's long-term planning involved with any gala. So talk about the importance of long-term planning that has helped make Casablanca such a successful gala.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting. I think oftentimes when planning an event of this scale, you get so um, engrossed in what needs to happen to get us to the gala this year. It's October. Our gala is a little under 100 days away, about 100 days away. And rather than just thinking about what do I need to get to February, I'm also sitting here thinking about, okay, who am I going to ask to chair the event next year? And so always trying to look ahead. Um, and so I think our biggest thing that I look at is our committee structure and constantly trying to develop future committee leadership and continuing to expand our network through our committee's connections. This year, we are trying a new model with our committee. In the past, we've had two gala chairs, and then we've had three subcommittees that are all led by subcommittee chair. This year, we have actually gotten rid of our subcommittees. The committee serves just as an at-large committee, and we have quote unquote leads who are kind of the champions of different areas of our gala. So we have leads for the auction, we have leads for sponsorship and table sales. And then the committee is kind of focused on anything that they're able to engage in within their own networks. Um, I'll also mention, I chatted a little bit earlier about our focus on guest experience. Um, I used to talk with our former CEO a lot about, we need to think about the auction because the auction is going to raise us money this year, but guest experience is going to raise us money in future years. If guests aren't having a good time, if they've had a bad experience, if the meal isn't good, they're not going to buy a table next year. They're not going to come back. So while it might on the surface be a good idea to cut expenses and reduce guest experience, that might help you this year because nobody's going to know what they're walking into that year. It is potentially going to impact revenue in years to come. So investing, obviously in your revenue generating activities on the night of, but also investing in your guests' overall experience with the event will set you up for long-term success.
I'm so glad you brought that piece up, because it is so critical, because people sense that. And the thing is, people talk after the fact about it. And I've heard of people, if they've had a bad experience and they've gone to something 8, 9, 10 years, they won't
Mhm.
go again if they had a bad experience. And it takes a lot of luring by that organization to get them back. So I really appreciate, Erin, that you're being a thought leader in that space, because there needs to be so much more, so much more of that. And, you talked some about the committee structure. I want to turn to the next question to Emily, just from like a leadership perspective, because I always view a successful gala as having, three stools. There's basically kind of the gala chair / committee leg, there's the organization leg, and there's the board leg. And for purposes of this segment, Emily, talk about the key of having a strong relationship between, the organization, which is you as the CEO, and the event chairs, who are kind of like the CEO of the event, so that you two are cohesive, on the same page, and aligned to raise the most amount of money possible.
I've got to give all the credit there to Erin and her team. So they are the glue that holds those two functions together. And, communication is such a huge part of that. Erin and her team's ability to make sure I know what's going on, that I know what it is that the committee values, And when we need to, we're talking to each other, but also that the committee knows what the organization's doing and hears those stories so that the night of the mission is front and center, no matter if you're talking to the CEO or the chair of the committee. We're there for the same reason. We both believe in the mission. And we're both telling stories that are compelling to make sure people connect with that mission and want to give their support. So I think developing those communication systems early, trusting in your communications professionals. So our advancement team, because comms and marketing are right there alongside fundraising on one team. They do such an excellent job of making sure I know what's going on with the committees and the committees know what's going on with CASA. And so I don't actually have to think about that very often because Erin does all of that thinking for me.
So I'm going to call this a hashtag. Communication creates cohesion. That's a lot to say, that three C words in a row, but communication creates cohesion. That's exactly, what you so brilliantly outlined there, Emily. And, I want to, Erin, I'm going to turn this next bit to you because there's really kind of, I want to talk about how you get people to kind of come back year after year because you talked about that guest experience. So talk about some things that a person or organization can do to make sure that people are coming back year after year for their own annual gala or signature fundraiser. Because when you have that devoted core, it opens up all these doors that you just can't imagine.
Um, I totally agree with you. And I honestly think that this is something that our team is always learning and growing and developing in. But I don't want to say obviously, one of the big things to focus on is your donor stewardship, leading up to the event and post-event. Once you hit event night, that shouldn't necessarily be when the stewardship of your donors and your table hosts begin. You should be thanking them before, during, and after the event. And I try my best the night of the event. If I know a guest maybe had a negative experience last year or had a piece of feedback from the gala last year, I try on the night of to personally go up to that donor and check in with them. A couple years ago, I received feedback from some vegetarian donors at our gala that our vegetarian meal wasn't great. And so last year, I walked up to their table. I chatted with the chef that morning to make sure the vegetarian meal was going to be, up to snuff. And then I walked up to their gala or their table during dinner, and I said, "Is this, how is the meal? Can I get you anything? Is this what you were expecting this year?" And I think that they really appreciated that in the 1,000 people that were in the ballroom at that time, that I walked up to their table and checked in and made sure that we had corrected the problem that they had experienced last year. I had a similar issue with a donor who complained about the noise level. We moved her table. I checked in with her the following year to make sure she was comfortable. And so just I think trying to get as close to every one of the 900 people in your ballroom think that they're the only person there, and trying to get as close to making them feel like they are the only person there as possible. I know it's really tough. So having systems developed before your event night so that post-event you can execute things as quickly and as efficiently as humanly possible so that you're emailing your donors within 48 hours of the event. That makes them feel like they were the only people there. And so systems, donor stewardship, and just listening to people's feedback and valuing it, and then following up with them to make sure that they felt heard and that you corrected the problem.
That's so critical. The, feeling like the only person there and the greatest event host. And it doesn't mean that that guest needs to be seen as you don't feel like the only person in the room the entire 4 hours they're there. But if they feel it for a moment or two, a couple of times, that is just golden. And a great host or a great organization will make that connection. That really does help fuel that loyalty, to come back year after year. And, the other thing is you always really have some fun themes. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about, the theming here. I'd love for you both to chime in. We can start with Erin and then Emily, you can chime in, but talk about, this year's theme and how the organization goes about selecting it.
Oh my gosh. It's a little different every year. And so I'll talk about a couple of different examples
Yeah,
and
that'd be great.
how we tackle our theme each year. I'll start with this year's theme where futures take root. Our gala chairs we always bring our gala chairs first this portfolio book that has like maybe 20 different kind of mood boards put together. And we go through the book with them and they look at pictures and they say, oh, I like this. I don't like this. I like this color. Don't like this color. From that feedback, we then bring back four more tailored mood boards to them. And we just continue to refine from there. This year, one of our gala chairs walked in and said, I really want to do something that's like Midsummer Night's Dream vibes. I think that that would be really elegant. I've always wanted to do an event like that. And so from that idea, we developed a mood board and we started, the advancement team came together and we started brainstorming words that have a Midsummer Night's Dream vibe to them that connect to our mission. And so that's where we started thinking about root systems. And that led us to thinking about the kids that we serve. And we're trying to create these strong roots so that they can flourish into the future. And so that's where futures take root became our tagline. Last year was our 40th anniversary, or this year is our 40th anniversary of CASA. So the February event, we knew we actually had a chair who owned a bar company. And so because of that, we were inspired to say cheers to 40 years. Well, then that made us feel like, oh, mid-century martini lounge type feel. And so the brand visuals kind of came from the tagline. So it's really kind of both. We approach it differently every year. We've had new programs at CASA start. We had a gala theme a few years ago called Strong Foundation, Promising Futures. And it was because we had started toying around with our Promising Futures campaign or with our Promising Futures initiative. And I had heard that and there was a mood board that we were looking at the time that was all these like rocks and geodes. And because of those two things, I was like, oh, let's put this together and we can make a tagline and a brand identity around it. So it just kind of happens organically every year. It's really beautiful and it's a really fun time of year to make all of that kind of visually and mission driven come together.
Well, I love how you explain that. And it actually, it ties into what Emily was saying earlier, the futures theme, especially about the new pilot program about, as children age out into adults. And, Emily, feel free to add anything that you like. But, when you hear a theme, especially maybe dialing in your program background a little bit, how cool is it like to you from a program perspective when when the themes tie into the program directly with certain initiatives that you're doing?
Oh, it's my favorite. I feel instantly invested if the theme and the tagline are mission driven and they often are. I think our team and our committees put a lot of effort into making sure that that experience for every guest is rooted in our mission. So when it's at the forefront in the tagline, folks like me buy in immediately because we love to see it. My whole career, I've told counselors I've trained, advocates I've trained, we're planting seeds, we're planting seeds. You're not always going to see immediate results in the seeds that you're planting. You have to believe that you may not be in the forest when the tree grows, but you're going to see it will grow eventually, whether you see it or not. And so this year's theme, I think, is really cool because most advocates, I hear volunteers say it all the time. We're planting seeds. If things didn't go the way you wanted them to, the kid didn't do exactly what you wanted them to do or what you thought was best for them. It doesn't mean you weren't a good advocate, that you weren't really, setting the stage for something to come later in their life. And so seeing that reflected in the CASABlanca theme, especially my first year as CEO, makes me feel more comfortable. My job's to tell the stories and I can do that, when the theme revolves around something I'm used to talking about and good at talking about. So I appreciate the assist this year, even if it was unintentional.
It's a nod to history and a vision for the future all rolled into one. I absolutely love that. And you've brought up the volunteers, and I have to say this because I have talked with people all over the state about your all's check-in process because I really think it's one of the gold standard ones I've ever been to. What is so cool about it is it didn't feel like check-in. And that was what was amazing. You got escorted into a side room. You weren't hunched over looking down at the volunteer and they're looking up with you. Can I get your credit card? Everyone was at a cocktail table. The volunteers were all dressed up like they wanted to be there. And it really was just amazing. So, Erin, talk a little bit about how important a streamlined check in process is in creating just an amazing first impression for guests that has them gung ho to be there all night long.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, by the way. I am so proud of our check-in process at our gala. One thing just last year, what made it even more special, I'll kind of talk through what our check-in process looks like a little bit. But one thing that made it so special is every person at that check-in station was one of our child advocacy specialists. So those are the staff members that are on the ground floor working directly with our volunteers and our kids. And we were so fortunate to have so much support from our staff last year that the entire check-in team was all staffed by those individuals, the people who see the work most directly. And that was just a really beautiful thing. That guests were greeted by people who see our work on a daily basis. So with that being said, yes, our check-in process kind of resulted a few years ago. We had a little bit of a nightmare check-in happen where our line was about a half hour long. People weren't bidding on the silent auction because they were in the check-in line. So the next year, we knew we needed to try something different. And I flew Southwest, and I went back to my team and I was like, what if our check-in was like the Southwest check-in, where everybody's lined up and there are terminals and there's one person and they wave you to the next open terminal and you check in that way and you make your way on with the night. And so from that idea, we kind of developed our check-in process. So everybody queues outside of a small kind of conference room. When you walk into the room, there are 12 different cocktail tables. So with one volunteer per cocktail table, which spreads everybody out. It doesn't make you feel cramped. It doesn't make you feel like you're kind of going through a cattle. I don't know. I'm not from West Texas, whatever.
Herding cattle. We'll,
Yeah,
we'll
there you
call it
go.
that because that essentially is what check-in is a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So
and you get checked in, you get your program, and you walk out a different door than you came in. So there's a really easy flow of traffic. We don't have any bottlenecks because of that reason. I think that that just really sets the tone for the night. You're not walking into cocktail hour flustered. It's very calm. It's kind of quiet in there. And so and we're handing out champagne while people are waiting in line. So if the line does get backed up a little bit, you have a glass of champagne. And I think it just lets people enter the space in a good mood, which is where we want donors. We want donors to be in a good mood all night long because they tend to donate when they feel happy. And so um, we're very fortunate that we work with the JW Marriott and we're afforded the space. I will definitely say if your event is in a small space, if your foyer is cramped, this check-in system will not work for you. You do need a lot of space to be able to do this. But if you feel like you have a big foyer that you can space out, we have 900 people and we have about 12 to 15 cocktail tables every year. So do that math for your event. I would highly recommend it. And as you mentioned, Rob, too, you're not hunched over a table as a guest. It does mean your volunteers do have to stand for 2 hours, but I just tell all the volunteers to wear flats, or I think we had one wearing sneakers. Their feet are under a tablecloth. Nobody's going to notice. It's going to be fine. So Yeah.
And cocktail and sneakers is in now anyway.
Yeah.
So, there's that. So it all works out well. Now you mentioned the volunteers. So talk about how CASA engages, because you really do have an incredible network. So talk about how you engage that volunteer network for the event.
We're really fortunate in not only our volunteer advocates that work directly on the cases, but we have so many companies and community groups who want to engage in our work in a meaningful way. And because our traditional core volunteer model is so time intensive, oftentimes it doesn't suit their needs. And so we utilize our events to take advantage of those partnerships throughout the year. And it allows our volunteer advocates who are able to attend the event to just relax and enjoy and have fun with their friends. And so we utilize the CASA staff pretty heavily at CASABlanca. Most staff members are serving in sort of a lead, quote unquote, lead role. We'll train the staff to lead a group of a group of volunteers, and then we engage with different companies and organizations throughout Austin. We work with about 3 or 4 sorority/fraternity groups out of Houston and UT, and then a couple corporations who bring in volunteers for the night of. So, yeah.
That's really, really cool how you leverage not just your own community, but other communities to bring it in because you feel that different energy and that just makes the room feel a little bit more fun and spontaneous. And Emily, I want to turn this next question back to you. So tell us what you're looking forward to for your first Casablanca as official CEO.
I think back to that very first night. I've been in nonprofits my whole career. I've been to lots of fundraisers, but something about the generosity in that room, my first night at Casablanca, was almost breathtaking. I remember, leaning over to my husband and saying, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" Because he's been with me at all of these fundraisers over the years, and both of us were just kind of starstruck by the generosity in that room and the ability of um, the event to connect 1,000 people, 900 people to the mission so quickly and so efficiently and inspire them to give so generously. So to get to see that from the stage is exciting for me. I've always been at Casablanca, as a table host or talking to different folks, different donors, volunteers, judges. Um, but getting to see it from the stage, getting to help direct the message and the story that we're going to tell is exciting. And, having been in the program side for so long, giving a voice to all of those advocates is really an honor for me. So I'm excited to get to do that in a way that hopefully will help connect those 900 people to our mission the same way that it did for me that very first night. I really can't say enough about Casablanca and the effort that our team puts into it because it spoiled me on other galas. I don't really like going to other galas because I don't feel as connected as I do at Casablanca. So to get to do that from a different role, to get to talk to more donors, more and more new people who maybe it's their first time interacting with CASA, to get to tell our story as the CEO, given my experience on the program side, I think will energize me in a new way and hopefully energize them to give in a new way. So I'm looking forward to it.
That's incredible. And I can't wait to see, how you insert your stamp as the new CEO on it. And, often those things with leadership, they tend to happen. The impacts can be seen. They're usually done in kind of subtle ways. So I'm really, really excited to kind of see how you put your spin on it as the leader this year, and especially with the program. I think it'll be really fun. And I know we're coming up on time here, and I like to always end with this question. And Emily, we'll have you go first, and then Erin, you can have the last word. And that is, what is one thing all great nonprofit events have in common?
I think the most important thing is that everyone leaves there connected to the mission, knowing what the mission is, feeling like they have somehow contributed to that mission and can feel a part of the community. I think what makes CASA so special is our ability to give the community a voice in the child welfare system. And CASABlanca allows us to do that for 900 community members all at the same time. So I think any successful fundraising event has to be mission driven and has to have everyone walk away feeling like they're invested in that mission.
Absolutely well said. The mission is absolutely critical. And Erin, you get the last word.
It's a hard one to follow Emily on that because I absolutely agree. I guess I'll tack on a little bit more from an event logistics side of things, but having an event that at least on the attendee side seems nearly flawless. No event, I mean, I feel like as an event planner, we're all kind of ducks in water. Our feet are going a million miles an hour, but on the surface, it should look calm and that everything is going smoothly. And I think guests can really feel that in the room. Yeah, I think people will walk away from that event wanting to come back for many years to come.
And they will. And I'm speaking as someone who has gone to this event many times. You know, you all really do just the most fantastic job with it. So I'm congratulating you in advance because I know, Emily, your first Casablanca CEO is going to be amazing. So, and I can't thank you
Thank
both
you.
for being so generous with your time today. So, Erin, Emily, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Absolutely. And the Casablanca Where Futures Take Root Gala will be held on February 7th, 2026 at the JW Marriott in Austin, Texas. For more information, please visit casatravis.org. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.